Hello from Jerusalem. Simon Jacobson, Wednesday Night Live. I'm speaking to you from the holy city of Jerusalem. These both very difficult times here, but also very empowering ones. So I can give you a live report of what is happening here on the ground in the holiest land, in the holiest city on earth, as the battles rage in Gaza and in other parts of the country. So fittingly, being that we're in the 9 days, this is a 9 days workshop called When Will We Stop Crying? The Deepest Love in the Throes of Suffering. So first let me give you a report. You have the feeling in this country, a very interesting paradoxical one, which I believe captures the essence of what makes Jews unique and how we survived and thrived actually over all these thousands of years. On one hand, it's a very somber mood. Just the other day, 5 Israeli soldiers were tragically killed. We're talking about 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. I cannot explain to you, but the whole country gets galvanized in the unity. I was actually driving back from Tel Aviv, from Herzliya, when that tragedy took place. And you have to see how the cab driver, who had himself went through 4 wars, was born in Israel in 1951, how his heart, literally you can feel it was like the pain of his own son. And I felt exactly the same way. And the country gets united, knowing that these are young people, our own children, who are doing the most sacred act on earth, and that is to protect another Jew. So wherever we may be, even if we're in the United States or other parts of the world, if you're a Jew, this attack was targeting Jews, as are all the missiles that are flying from Gaza. I'm not going to get into now the ridiculous and preposterous political shenanigans when you're dealing with life and death of a country that has done nothing except be Jewish, under attack for no reason except because they don't like the Israeli state. This has nothing to do with a Palestinian state. The attack is on any random city in the country, Tel Aviv and so on. You could only imagine if they had complete control what would be going on, how many tunnels would be being built as we speak, whether it's on the West Bank or in Gaza or from the north. I don't even want to open my mouth. Millions of dollars, years and years of building. What I would like to talk about is how we stand strong, even in difficult times. And as the battles are raging, and I hope no alarm goes off as we speak here, you can see I'm sitting right near the old city, the walls. These are the walls that stand behind, the cover that surround the old city. These are the walls that were breached close to 2,000 years ago by the Romans and close to 2,400 years ago by the Babylonians. Obviously the walls have been rebuilt. They were breached on the 17th of Tammuz, and then they were destroyed, and the temple within these walls was destroyed on the 9th of Av, which is coming up. So there's no closer place. This is ground zero, but not ground zero just recent times. This is ground zero of thousands of years. And in it we can find not just answers, but direction and guidance. And especially in this time where Israel, ironically, is under siege again. Thank God this time we have a strong army. We have a strong spine. Politically, unfortunately, not so strong. But the unity that you feel here is tremendous. So basically, anyone you speak to, this is on their mind. The country is not oblivious of what's going on. It's running smoothly. The roads are filled. There are less tourists. The hotels are empty, relatively speaking. But it's thriving. You feel it. You can see also the streets are also full. Not as full as it usually would be in this period of the year. So what you have here is a tremendous resolve of going on, but nobody is unaware. It's not a complacency, which is very gratifying to see. People aren't saying, oh, you know, it didn't happen to me. It's not my problem. There's, as I said, a deep unity, a deep pain and anguish. At the same time, deep resolve. Obviously, I didn't do a full poll or interview, but I can sense that everybody says, let's get rid of this once and for all. How much bleeding? How long do we have to cry? The question of the 9 days. So let's talk a bit about that in this context, giving you the panorama that you see. I wish you could also feel the mood. I'm trying to convey it as best as possible. I feel here, as I sit here, that these stones right here, who knows who walked here? Did Abraham walk here? Jacob? Isaac, when they went and Isaac was brought to the Akedah, was it maybe right through this path? Did Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues stand right here as they look down on the destruction with all his friends and colleagues crying and Rabbi Akiva smiling? How many the high priest, how many Kahanim, Levim? We know Moses didn't walk here because he never entered the promised land. But how many other people walked right here, saturated this ground here? We know that this city is built upon a city, is built upon a city. So I feel tremendous awe and a tremendous sense of humility to be in this presence of literally absorbed, saturated with the blood, sweat, and tears, the sacrifices, the commitments of Jews throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia. At the same time, we're not, as I said, oblivious of the challenges of life. We're in the 9 days. It's a time of mourning and grieving. There are no weddings going on. One cab driver actually told me, he said that, in general, the 9 days is a lull because there are no weddings, but it's a little more now. On the other hand, we see this unbelievable power and this unbelievable resolve and unbelievable strength. I'm middle of a recording, but I just want to say hello to you. New York is going to see this. Yeah.
How you doing?
David Aaron, of all people, Hashgacha Pratis from Israelite. So my good friend. Hey, Shalom Aleichem. Say hello. Say hello.
Shalom, shalom.
Walking down the path here, only in Israel.
How you been?
I could meet probably ships in the night, but
Yes,
here
yes.
you meet.
If you're
the
here,
holy
guess what?
places.
How long are you here for?
Till Thursday, a week from Thursday.
So
I'm recording
we
my
can all
Wednesday
sit
night
together.
class. That's what I'm doing.
Oh,
So it'll all be on. It's all right. Famous David Aaron, good friends, colleagues. We all want to know what you're listening to.
Listen to Hasidus. Actually, a Chabad rabbi. Very good.
Who is that?
My wife gave it to me. I didn't even see his name. But he really examined us.
Great.
Go to.
What language?
It's in Hebrew.
Okay.
Go to.
Good to see you. Hashgacha Pratit. Anyway, so what exactly is the secret of being able to, on one hand, have endured so much pain and at the same time come out not just surviving but thriving? What is also the paradox of Am Yisrael Chai, of us all retaining a certain perpetuity, a certain eternity that continues, as I said, saturates this ground? And I frankly feel extremely empowered because I feel we're part of a long history, an unbroken chain. And I want to try to share that as much as possible. So we're here in the 9 days. As I said, the temple is being destroyed on Tisha B'Av. Hopefully this Tisha B'Av won't be a day of mourning, it will be a day of celebration. But we have to also prepare for both sides of the coin. So we diminish in Simcha, it says, Mishanichnas of, as of enters, we mamayitim b'simcha, we diminish in joy. The Munkatcher Rebbe, the Minchas Elazar, writes that interesting take, Mishanichnas of, when we enter the sad month of Av, mamayitin, you diminish the of, the sadness, b'simcha, with joy, with permissible joy. That's the study of Torah, keeping mitzvahs, not through weddings, not through other ways, but finding ways to do joy. That's how we diminish, which is an interesting understanding. What is this, finding a loophole? We're supposed to be remembering and grieving. What are we trying to do? Find somewhere simcha? The answer is because the grieving is really only one component of the whole process. So let me share with you a fascinating Talmud that took place on Tisha B'Av. It says when they entered the temple, it was the Aron, the Aron Habris, the holy tabernacle, the holy ark, was there in the Holy of Holies, the holiest place on earth. And when they entered, the Babylonians entered, it says the Kruvim, the cherubs, were facing each other. Now the Talmud says the cherubs were symbolic of the Jews and God. One was male, one was female. It was like a marriage. When they faced each other, it meant it was a moment of love. When God was displeased, the cherubs turned miraculously and faced back to back. So why in this moment, in the throes of suffering, in the worst and darkest time of all, were the cherubs facing each other? This would have been the time where God felt that the Jews were had forsaken God, and therefore, as a result, felt and experienced a distance, not a closeness. Why would they be facing each other? So the Talmud says The Talmud explains, the Chassidus explains this Talmud, that sometimes you want to know the deepest love of individuals, the deepest love you experience in times of crisis and suffering. Sometimes when people, everything is going well, so people are on automatic pilot, they're doing things that are not necessarily digging deeper and finding the deeper strength. But when there's a crisis, when you see, for example, someone is challenged health-wise, or another type of challenge, what happens then? You suddenly see, you muster up new energy. The deepest love of all is experienced when there's such challenge. Now, we should not have to wait for that. But if you really want to see the connection of God and the Jewish people, you look at the time of destruction. Because we would never know how deep the love was if everything went well. The fact that we are here in 2014, after everything we went through in the Holocaust, on one hand, yes, you can complain about the suffering we went through, but what about appreciating that we endured it all? That's what didn't kill us, that which did not kill us made us stronger. Again, we're not justifying why it happened, but it brings out a depth of a connection. Why is Yom Kippur the holiest day of the year? You know, soon we'll be coming to the beginning of the month of Elul. And the book 60 Days, which many of you probably have, it's all the story of love, betrayal, and reconciliation. The love that happened at Matan Torah, Yom Chatanotay, Zeh Matan Torah, the marriage of the Jewish people and God. Then came the betrayal. They built a golden calf 40 days later. 17th of Tammuz begins the 3 weeks, the saddest time of the Jewish calendar, the period we are in now. And then, 40 days later, Moses went up on the mountain on the Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of Elul, which is in a month from now approximately, and to pray for forgiveness. And finally he prevailed on Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur, 120 days later, after he received the Torah, it's called the consummation of the marriage, and he received the second tablets. And Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year, more than Shavuot when we received the Torah. Because on Shavuot we received the law, and on Yom Kippur we receive forgiveness. We receive the birth of hope. What does that mean? That even if we make a mistake, we can fix it. That shows much deeper love. When a couple, for example, is together and everything is going well, great, beautiful love. But when they're challenged to the point where it can maybe break, to the point that it could be destroyed, betrayal, then comes the test, time of reckoning. And then when they do not break apart, but they only get stronger, and they reconnect, then you see the depth of the love. That even a broken contract, so to speak, even a betrayal could not destroy the relationship, the love. That's why the two cherubs faced each other. They faced each other because that was a time when their deepest connection was revealed. But you'll say everything is burning around you. So you know there's another statement. The Talmud says, the Medrash I should say in Eicha Rabbah. Eicha Rabbah is the Medrash on the Book of Lamentations, Eicha, that we read the night of Tisha B'Av. Will be next Tuesday night. What do we read? What does the Medrash say? That there was a man traveling, a Jew traveling up northern Israel. And he met an Arab farmer. And he asked him, what's happening? So the farmer listens to this cow, and the cow groaned. He said, what's happening? Your temple was just destroyed. Which was a tragedy. He probably tore his clothes. Kriya. Began the destruction of the temple. Then a moment later, or a few moments later, the cow groaned again. Gaza parase, second time. And this time he said, now what? He says, Neilad Mashiach Shel Yisrael. The Savior of Israel has just been born. Right after the destruction, in the throes, the fires, as the fires were rising highest, as the temple was being destroyed, Tisha B'Av afternoon, that is when you have the birth of Mashiach, the Messiah. We say therefore, the Arizal says, Nachem. We say a special prayer in the Mincha afternoon prayer. What does this mean? Why is such paradox? Why do they have to come together? Why can't we just have two separate things? Here's suffering for whatever reason, and then at another time. Because in Judaism, theologically, philosophically, there's no such thing as evil as an end in itself. Nothing is just self-contained. Everything is a process of going from one place to another place. It's a journey, as I discussed in last week's class. Understanding that is the metamorphosis. So even when the flames are licking and burning and the temple is being destroyed, and we grieve and cry over it, in there it's not an end, it's only the raising of a building with a Z in order to build a greater building, the third temple. This is an attitude that the Jews always carried in our genes, that as dark as it gets, darkness always is the birth of a deeper light. As the moon wanes at Rosh Chodesh Av and disappears, as the Arizal writes, it says, when the moon wanes and disappears in Av, it's far worse than any other month, because the moon is Malchut, dignity. And when was dignity most diminished, even though every new moon, but in Av is the real diminishing. And that's why on the 15th of Av, which will be in 2 weeks from now, when the moon is full, Lo Yehoy Yom Tovim LiYisrael, Ki Chamisha Asar B'Av and Ukiyem HaKippurim. There were no holiday in Israel that was as great as the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. How do you equate the two? Because both of them come from a betrayal that brings a greater light. The full moon of Av is far more profound. You may not see it physically with your eyes, but more profound symbolically, because it's a light that came out of the darkest times. That means the darkness was the birthing of the light. So though birth pangs hurt, and though there are many changes when we go from one stage to another, but the power of the birth that comes out of it, the birth of Mashiach, the birthday of Mashiach, the full moon, the Yom Kippur experience, the forgiveness that comes, creates an enduring element. Why is it enduring? Because there's a law that says, Shtar sheyotza lo virur. If you have a contract that's challenged, which means someone challenges the validity of the contract, and then it's appealed, and then it's confirmed, it says you can never challenge it again. So as long as the contract was not challenged, there's always possibility someone's going to say it's not a valid contract, a legal contract. But once it's been challenged and it was upheld, that's like a knot that was broken but then retied together, like I said before with relationships. Once you did not have once you have the love challenged and then it's connected, that creates eternity, because then you can never challenge it again. And also psychologically that's the case. You know, as long as somebody has never gone through difficulties, you never know what would be if they did go through difficulties. When you see someone was challenged, they were tortured, God forbid, they were challenged in some other way, and then they withstood it, then you know you can trust them. Again, we should not need that, but we have had that throughout history. That, my friends, therein lies the paradox of this space and the paradox of this country. The holiest land with the most wounds. Where has more blood been shed? More wars fought over the holy city, Jerusalem. The Jews, and then the Christians, the Muslims, the Crusades. Because we have here the paradox, but the key to survival is to understand that nothing can break us. As they were oppressed, in direct proportion to that, they prospered, flourished, thrived. And that is the paradox of the 9 days, the paradox of Tisha B'Av, and the paradox of what's taking place right now in this holy land. And that is that despite the challenges and the anguish, burying young children, no one should ever know of that. And not just like that, children who went to protect others, innocent men, women, and children of the Holy Land of Israel, people we should be indebted to with every part of our lives. Nothing more anguish than that. But at the same time, as I just heard one of the Chavra Knesset, a woman from, I forgot which party, one of the religious parties, she lost a son a few years ago, so she says to an interviewer, so does the deaths of these soldiers, should that deter us? Should we slow down, call for a ceasefire? Says on the contrary, I speak with the credibility of a mother who lost a child. It would be a disgrace, a disservice to our children if we did not redeem it by once and for all finishing the job. If you don't finish the job, then the life would have been wasted. What was it doing? Not protecting. If we ourselves are not ready to destroy the enemy and destroy any risks and future missiles launching and future tunnel attacks. We all are hearing now that Shin Bet's report, being coming out now more official, still off the record, but more official, more known, that there was going to be a tragic attack from many tunnels. Now we know there are 30, 40, 50 tunnels coming out in all kinds of different towns, cities, kibbutzes in Israel on Rosh Hashanah, dressed like the IDF. You can imagine what kind of confusion, what that could have created, a surprise attack like that. And tragically, we discover it now, but what that prevented. And by no means, again, is this a gift, but it's an interesting twist, another twist in how things evolve, that God really protecting the Jewish people. The fact that so many missiles, over 2,500 missiles, have not hurt anyone, or minimally hurt. I can't say it hasn't hurt anyone. The fact that while all this is happening, one of the great miracles before the Jews left Egypt was not just the 10 plagues and the redemption from Egypt, was also that the Egyptians turned on each other. It says the Michran, the firstborn, turned on their own Egyptians. You see, in Syria, in Egypt, in Iraq, in Iran, in other countries, civil wars, infighting, just what they call the Arab Spring, which has turned into the Arab Winter. So is this God's gift? You know, everyone should have peace and everything should be fine, but as long as you have hatred, what better way to cancel it out by having the hated people hate each other and attack each other? Unfortunately, it's still affecting us. We have to stand strong. But we take the lesson from these 9 days that in the throes, in the abyss, in the heart of the furnace, lies the greatest love. Now let's take this to our personal level, which is us as individuals. We're individuals, each of us goes through our difficult times. Yeah, when you hear such losses, such deaths, you hear the challenges, you hear the fears and all that, you say, what are my problems compared to that? But let's be honest, problems can be canceled out because there are other problems elsewhere. To tell somebody, hey, well, look at your problems, they're nothing compared to someone else. Still, you go home alone, depressed, feeling down. Some of us need shidduchim. Some of us are suffering health. Some of us have difficulties with our children. Some of us have our own internal psychological issues. The list goes on. We take great strength in 9 days. We do not back away. We look the enemy in the eyes. Take the bull by the horns. We're not afraid to say, yes, this is an abyss. This is a fire burning. But within it, we're absolutely convinced that the ashes of the Holocaust, of the bodies that were cremated, is born the greatest strength possible, that nothing can kill or destroy us. Not the Nazis, not the communists, not the Bolsheviks, not the Cholomnitskys, the Cossacks, not the Inquisitions, not the Crusaders, not the Egyptians, not the Babylonians, not the Romans, not the Persians, not the Greeks, not the Ottomans. Wherever you turn, either these empires don't exist or there's a bare remnant of any of them, if there is at all. And we are here, Atam ma'atam kol ha'amim, the fewest of nations. As the Talmud says, why ma'at? Because ma'ayitin asasma. We never took ourselves seriously. We always took the cause seriously. And when you dedicate yourself to the cause, even if you're killed, the cause is not killed. The spirit is not destroyed. That's why it can't be vanquished. What was Pharaoh's great mistake? And this was the mistake, thank God, of all our enemies. Pharaoh's great mistake is when he heard from his stargazers that said, there's going to be a man that will rise, Moses, and he will save the Jewish people from Pharaoh and his clutches and the enslavement that they enslaved the Jewish people. So Pharaoh thought the best idea is a great idea. What he'll do is he'll kill all the new Jewish boys, all the little boys, because that way they'll never grow up to be the Moses. So he decreed, Kol haben hayolud, every boy, male boy that will be born, you should throw him into the river Nile. The couples, the Jewish couples, the husbands and wives said to each other, the husband said, you know what, let's not have children until this horrible decree is over, is abolished. Because every boy is going to be killed. And the woman said, how will we ever leave this God-forsaken country? How will the promises that we were told, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the generations, that we will go to the promised land, if we don't have children? Who will be here? We won't have anyone to inherit our lives, our legacies. And the woman, of course, prevailed. And they found ways. Some women went to the field, the Talmud says, to give birth to children. Many Jewish boys were killed. But you know what? The one that counted wasn't. Because Yocheved, his mother, ingeniously built crafted a little basket. She smeared it with tar, with waterproof materials, and put it onto the river Nile to float. She sent her daughter Miriam to watch over her little brother, Moses. And who found him? The daughter of Pharaoh. And that's why it's called Moshe. He's not even called by the names that his Jewish parents gave him at his bris. He's called Moses, Moshe, Minamaya Mishisuyo, because from the water I draw you out. So his name that forever is remembered is a name that Pharaoh's daughter gave him. The Pharaoh that decreed that the boy should be killed because not to allow the Savior to be born, the one who will lead the Jewish people, his own daughter was the one that saved Moses and brought him up in the palace of the king Pharaoh. Why? Because old Pharaoh did not understand the power of the Jewish people. He thought, how could I kill them? He projected his own power, firepower, strong, muscular men. They can vanquish women and children who are weak. He didn't think the women have power. But they have the most power because it was the power of Amunah, of faith. And the power of faith endures everything. How could you fight faith? You can't fight it with weapons. You can't fight it with male soldiers. You can't fight it with brute strength. Faith is invisible. Faith is invisible. Faith and trust in God. And that's why Pharaoh could not vanquish them. He probably never even knew. Even later, he couldn't understand. Interesting, right after Pharaoh and his Egyptians, he witnesses his Egyptians drowning in the sea, the Jews say, Va'ibinu ba'Hashem b'Moshe avdi. They trusted in God, they had faith in God and his faithful servant Moses. And his servant Moses. So the faith is what helped them endure, and that's the faith that helped us endure. That despite as dark as things may be, as the fires and the flames rise, the temple's destruction, there's a deep faith that this is not the end of the story. A woman who lost her husband at a young age, and she tells me, she writes to me an email, and I see in her signature of her email, she writes to me, I guess to everyone she writes, she says, in the end, everything will be good. If it's not good, it means it's not the end. How beautiful to hear that from a person who suffered like that. I mean, we wish we wouldn't have such beauty, but how powerful is such a statement? That in the end, everything will be good, and if it's not good, it means it's not the end. That's the story. It's a long marathon that is captured in these walls here, in these steps that I'm sitting on right now. Every inch here saturated. And saturated with what? Saturated with challenges, but saturated with deep hope. Saturated with unbelievable power, with unbelievable strength. A power that has endured everything. That in the throes of all that we've gone through, we find this deeper love. So every one of us, whatever we're dealing with, whatever challenge, we should always remember that, not that some challenges are greater and you shouldn't think your challenges are important. Remember, for every challenge you're given an amount of strength that's equal and more than the challenge itself. I remember the early days when the Intifada took place, again right here in these areas here. So I remember that there was if you remember, there were almost 3 bombings a week in the year 2000, 2001. Al tiftach peh, pa'amayim tzara, should never happen again. So there were many students, and there were attacks, and there were explosions that took place. In Ben Yehuda and other places, it turned it into a ghost town, obviously. So it was once a woman who came to one of my classes. It's a friend of hers, and she, I saw from a distance, she looked very nice, but then when she got closer, I saw that her face was worked on. She had plastic surgery. And she tells me the following, that she was an American girl, went to study in Israel. She couldn't tell her parents because they would never let her go. They were from a secular home. So she told them she's traveling to the East, Middle East. And she was waiting Friday at one of the cafes for a friend. One of the suicide bombers, terrorists, I should call murderers, left a suitcase right in that restaurant there, that cafe, blew up, many casualties. It was one of the first big attacks. So on a Friday afternoon, I remember everyone was shaken by it. And there were deaths, and many people, many casualties, many wounded. She survived, barely. And she tells me, she says, everything, I lost everything. I lost my hearing, I lost my smell, I lost my taste. I even lost my face. I was lying in a hospital in such pain because of the burns and so on. And I asked God every moment, why are you leaving me alive? Her parents found out that she's there from a bloody picture of her face on CNN. And then they realized that she was there. So you imagine, they forgave her. That was not the issue. They came flying, etc. Says, why an American girl gave my life to come study here? Parents who would not agree, I did it behind their back. Of all people, not that anyone should deserve it, but why me? Why did I have to suffer like this? This is what the questions I had in a hospital bed, marinating in these juices that allowed the pain to somewhat subdue the terrible, horrible pain from the burns. Take my life. Why you left me with nothing? No dignity, no body, no face, no sound, no hearing. And she said, really, I wanted to die every day. This is what she tells me. One day I woke up with such a surge of strength. I'm going to fight to live. And these are the words I'll never forget she told me. She said, faith, trust, amuna, betachon. You cannot appreciate its power until you have nothing but faith. When you have other things, you have other resources to turn to, other faculties, other recourses. But when you have nothing, then you suddenly appreciate this power. She said, the surge that came to me was from amun and betachon. I mean, I started crying just from hearing that. This is what she came out of. After all the complaints, Ashrei Yoladete, her parents should be proud of such a daughter. Not everybody, people develop bitterness, people develop resentment, anger to the negative things in our lives. The Jewish lesson is Tisha B'Av, the 9 days. Bitterness and anger, what benefit does it bring you? Obviously, the natural inclination, we gravitate to that, resentment. But if you're a healthy person, you have to dig deeper and realize, not that there's a reason this happened, and do not allow yourself to succumb. Your dignity should not allow yourself to succumb to this tragedy. So human beings all have their feelings, and we all are, as I said, entitled. And there's a way to transcend them. Now, what someone says, one second, what happens if I'm not healthy? Well, we all have the power to be healthy. Nobody was born unhealthy. Even if we grew up in an environment with parents that were resentful, we heard a lot of bitterness and anger, this is why we study Torah. This is why we come together. This is why we visit Israel. This is why we gather strength from each other. Why we talk to each other. Because you're not doomed to just play the old record of your bitterness and grievances. We're not doomed. Each of us has deeper power. These 9 days teach a person, even if you've been wounded, even if you grew up in an unhealthy family, even if you had your own mini microcosmic destruction of your own temple due to abuse, due to other harsh and sometimes not so harsh, but very just the destructive forces in our childhood. Remember, every fire has within it the birth of something greater. You ever see some forests that burn down with forest fires? And you see there's an unbelievable regeneration. Because nature learns to rebuild. And we too, the soul has that resilience and that power. The Jewish people can teach the entire world, not only that you can survive suffering, but that we can thrive through it. In the 9 days, there's no better time. So as we sit here in the Holy Land, as I sit here, I bring you warm regards from the Jewish people here. Very happy to be here now. Everyone says to me, so commendable that you are really came here. I said, what better time to come? This is the time we're one family, we're one nation, we're one organism. This is the best time to be here. Best time. Obviously, I'd rather all this didn't happen. But no way do I feel in any regrets. On the contrary, I feel strong to be here. I do not sense panic. I don't sense weakness. I sense anguish. I sense a sense of tentativeness as a result of what is going on. Young people who are protecting, as I said, the holy Jewish land. And I sense history. Whereas in the United States, it's easy to be complacent. Here, you cannot be complacent, especially in times like this. My hope is that we should be able to translate the non-complacency into a non-complacency that carries over to good times. When everything is going well, to not take it for granted. To realize that we have to do something about bringing the world into a better place. Because we also are told in the Talmud, any generation that does not rebuild the temple is as if they destroyed the temple. Which begs the question, why is that the case? Because 2,000 years ago, close to 2,000 years ago, Jews hated sinas chinam, baseless hatred. That's why we are responsible. Well, my friends, because the Beis HaMikdash is not just a building that was destroyed 2,000 years ago. It's being destroyed every second due to our inability to be united, due to our divisiveness, to our lack of perfection. So if we don't, when we rebuild the Beis HaMikdash in our own hearts and souls, we actually are rebuilding the temple in the physical sense, which is what Yecheskel was told. The prophet Ezekiel, when he saw the temple going to be destroyed, he said to God, what are you doing? You're leaving them without a house. You said, V'aseh li migdash, build for me a sanctuary and I will rest among them. There'll be no sanctuary. God said, I give you the measurements. I give you the structure of the temple. Study it. And every detail, and it will be considered as if you're rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash. So it's true we may not be responsible for the events that happened thousands of years ago, but we're responsible for events today. which does not meant to make us feel guilty or feel burdened. On the contrary, it should make us feel responsibility. Is the dignity of a human being to know you can do something about this situation. So you can read the Talmud and say, why am I being blamed for the destruction of the temple? Like that kid in school who was always being blamed for good reason for doing trouble. So once the teacher says to him, so, Husham, who broke the window in the classroom? Not me. Husham, who stole the food from the kitchen? Not me. Husham, who created heaven and earth? Not me. You know, he got so used to saying not me. So this is not about feeling guilty that here another thing is put on our plate. Besides all other guilt and responsibilities, we also destroyed the temple. On the contrary, it means you have the power to do something about it. And simple actions would be, in these days, as we're going to read in the Haftorah of Yeshaya, Chazon Yeshaya, Siyam b'mishpat tapada v'shaveh b'tzedakah. How do we redeem Zion? How do we redeem its captives? Which is, unfortunately, virtually what is happening now. Captive being taken. That's how this whole thing began, with those 3 tragic deaths and first kidnappings of those boys. Siyam b'mishpat, through mishpat. Mishpat is justice, through studying law, through studying Torah. V'shaveh b'tzedakah, through redeeming the captives through charity. So this also has symbolic meaning. It doesn't just mean physical study and law and giving charity, but being there for each other. We rebuild the temple, we redeem Zion, and we redeem its captives by uniting together, by studying together, by studying specifically the laws of the temple, something the Rebbe emphasizes a lot, by charity, which is a unifying force, helping each other, financially, time, volunteer, advice. So we are charged with something we can do. And no one has the excuse to say, I can't do anything, I'm a bystander. We are players in the game. We have the ability to change the destiny of Jerusalem, of the Holy Temple, of Israel in general, by discovering within ourselves the Israel, the Jerusalem, the temple within us, rebuilding it through our good acts and deeds, and through studying and understanding that the temple is really you. There are books that talk about this, by Rabbeinu Bechai, the Shalah, Torah Ta'ola from the Ramah, that talk about how the different elements of the temple correspond to our lives. And therefore, by building it in our lives, we rebuild the temple. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, I actually discussed this in a series of classes that's available to the microcosm of the temple within us, the mini sanctuary within each of us. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev says about this coming Shabbos Chazon, that Shabbos Chazon is the vision of Isaiah about the destruction. He says, interprets it another way. He says that in this Shabbos Chazon, every Jew is shown a vision. The vision of what? Of the third temple, from a distance. The vision for the third temple from a distance. Why? In order to awaken a gaguim, a yearning, a deep thirst to have this temple again. That means this Shabbos we all will have the ability to see something. Now it will be the Shabbos, please God, right here in Jerusalem. I'm going to look very closely to see if I see the third temple. And I ask you all to do the same. How do you look for the third temple? We're not looking here for some museum piece, some replica, some physical item. You're looking for the meaning of the temple, the significance of the temple, which is the yearning that it creates in us. And when you contemplate that on this day is the day when the temple was destroyed, and you think about it, and you close your eyes and say, but you know, sometimes a building is raised, as I said, with a Z, in order to be rebuilt. So if you look close enough, you can see in the raising of the building, the rebuilding of something far greater and bigger. Migdash Adnei Chen Yadecha, an eternal temple that can never be destroyed. And what do? The yearning. If you feel yearning and hunger, and you do something about it, you add the increase in the Torah, you increase in the charity, then you have the Tziyam B'Mishpat Tepa, the Zion is redeemed with Mishpat, with law, and its captives with charity. So God should bless, first of all, Israel, that should have shalom, real peace. Not some fabricated and not some temporary and not political, but one that is true. And remember, when there's peace for everybody. We pray for peace for every human being on earth. You know, the Medrash says something which is very moving. It says, had our enemies known how much the temple protects them, they would have surrounded it with legions of armies and not allow anyone to destroy it. Had they only known. Sometimes you destroy the thing that's saving your life. Israel is a holy land because God chose its holiness. Jews are a promised holy people, a chosen people because God chose them. He gave them this land, and Rashi brings and says there will be people who say, you stole this land from us, you occupied this land. Tell them it is God that gives the land to whoever he gives it. He gave the entire globe to the nations of the world. He gave all the parts of the world outside of Israel to other nations. One sliver of land he gave to the Jewish people. Let us rest. Let us just have what God gave us. Let Jews recognize that. And if we were proud of what God gave us, everything would change. This is how we have to have our attitudes to this time in general and in all times. That we are in a place which is a holy land, a land that God promised us. Promised land, a holy land. And it's our job is to complement the holiness with our own holiness. That's ultimately the greatest dissonance. Are we as holy as the land? So we're sitting here and trying to replicate. How do you replicate? You look for the third temple, which is waiting to be rebuilt. As they say, Yerushalayim Shalmaila, Yerushalayim Shalmata, Migdash Shalmaila, Migdash Shalmata. We're looking to find a way to connect the spirit of the temple within us with a physical temple ready to be rebuilt. And I can say I'm proud to be a Jew, proud to be here in this holy land. Thousands of years later, we're here standing, maybe limping a bit, a little wounded, but we're here. And we're here strong. God should help, as I said, first of all, to protect, above all, the Tzavah, Haganah Yisrael, which is Tzahal. This is the army that protects Israel. That's what it means. There's no more sacred act, Mesirat Nefesh, than that. I remember summer of 1977, a group of what they called Nake, called the wounded, the handicapped, the casualties of Israeli soldiers came to New York. And they were offered to come see the Rebbe. And the Rebbe came downstairs and gave a special talk for them. You saw them you saw people sitting in wheelchairs, other parts of their bodies missing. That was a tragic sight. And the Rebbe spoke to them and gave them strength. Then he asked for permission. He said, I'd like to go over to each of you, give you a charity, a shlich, to be a messenger of mine, giving something to charity, and also to shake your hands. And the Rebbe went over to each one and did that, and gave each of them a blessing. And we know one story among many. There was a Kalib was his name. He was wounded. I think he lost both his legs in one of the wars. And as you can imagine, your life changes after that. And what changed besides was his physical challenges. So yes, he was supported, but his emotional challenges were far deeper. You know, after a while, you started looking at it as a Rahmanis case. People have mercy on you. But he never felt dignity. Never felt appreciated. He was really demoralized in many ways, worse than the actual wounds that he had incurred. Here in 770, the Rebbe speaking, he felt the strength. He said in the Rebbe's eyes he saw someone who really appreciated them. But then when the Rebbe came by, this was the real thing that blew him away. The Rebbe said to him, thank you. Thank you. And no one had ever told him thank you. The Rebbe recognized that's what he needed to hear. A thank you for what he had done, the sacrifices. So we're here to give people dignity. These are the highest ranking people. The Rebbe said that when he spoke to them, that by seeing the wound on the soldier is the Mesiras Nefesh. What is the wound from? He has a living wound for sacrificing his body to save another person. And it's an enduring one. You know, God forbid someone dies, so of course they gave their life. Here's an enduring one that's a visible scar, a visible sign that you protected another innocent Jew. There's no greater and higher level than such Mesiras Nefesh. That's what I see, and that's what I feel. And I feel we're all part of it, and we have to appreciate it, not take it for granted. Each of us are warriors in this battle, but we have different roles to play. Some are at the front of Gaza, some are in the communications department, some are in surveillance, some are in intelligence, some are shooting flares. And each of us has our role. What's our role? Is the spiritual role. Those of us that don't fight physically is the spiritual role. Or there's also financially supporting. There's the spiritual role of building your Israel in you, fortifying your Yisrael. Remember, Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael is the same name, the nation of Israel, the land of Israel. Building the Beit HaMikdash within each of us. Doing things that are kindness, love. Building the Beit HaMikdash. The stronger we do that, the more we fortify the whole body. because the Jewish people are one body. So we look at a good army, a good military, it's not just one guy doing the job, everybody's doing their job across the board, across the ranks. That's what creates an indestructible army. So each of us, wherever we may be, whether you're in New York or Sydney or New Zealand or in Bangkok, in any of the continents across the world, Europe, Asia, North America, South America, Antarctica, I should also say, Africa, each of us has our role to play. We're all links in one chain, all limbs in one body. And these 9 days, may we find that deeper love. Not just hidden, but find that deeper love that's embedded within the flames. And discover that in connecting with each other. And again, I bring you warm regards from Yerushalayim. And please, if anybody wants to email me your name, or would like to give some charity on behalf of the Jewish people here, on behalf of the soldiers, I'll be happy to pass that on. Just email us or make a donation online. This has been Simon Jacobson sitting here right outside the old city of the Walls for the Meaningful Life Center. And please, until next Wednesday from 8:15, we'll give the next class also hopefully here from Eretz Yisrael and Jerusalem. Everyone should have a very healthy week, a Shalom Dika week, Shalom Al Yisrael, real Shalom, peace. Peace for all peoples, all nations. And finally, together, before Tisha B'Av, we should already celebrate. Yehavchu, these days should be transformed from sad days to Moedim, Tevim, Sasna L'Simcha, to joyous occasions, to holidays. The greatest holiday of all, Tisha B'Av, we see the greatest love in the deepest darkness. Thank you very much. From Jerusalem, this has been Simon Jacobson.